10 one-sided battles in One Piece. Frequently, the One Piece universe is characterized by its numerous close battles and narrow victories. The Straw Hats are no strangers to slender success against overwhelming obstacles. We start with Luffy versus Bellamy. After seeing Bellamy's Spring Devil Fruit in action, it seemed as if facing him would have taken more than just Luffy to get the job done. However, despite the long build-up to Bellamy's first attack against the Straw Hat pirate captain, most of which he spends berating Luffy, all it took was a single well-timed punch from the aspiring pirate king to take him down. Bellamy was going to need a lot more than just the spring fruit to take down Luffy. Next up at number 9, we have Ivanov versus Sanji. Ivanov completely humiliated Sanji. When Ivanov finally returned to his kingdom, he and Sanji fought for the right to earn a boat and the knowledge of Luffy's whereabouts. Despite having already faltered to Emporio's substitute, Sanji felt confident in his odds to defeat the nation's rightful ruler. Predictably, his hubris was ill-conceived. Emporio brought the man to his knees through a combination of brutal techniques. Despite his loss, Sanji nonetheless consented to take on all of Kamabaka Kingdom in order to discover the secret behind its strengthening recipes. In the 8th spot, we have Kuma versus the Straw Hats. The former warlord completely obliterated them and unscattered them for several years. Although Rayleigh kept Kizaru busy, he could not protect the Straw Hats from Kuma, a warlord of the sea first encountered on Thriller Bark. After Luffy punched a world noble, the full might of the Marines bore down on the archipelago. None of the Straw Hats' attacks were successful in thwarting their titanic mechanical adversary. Ultimately, Luffy was forced to watch as his friends were scattered before his eyes and cursed himself for his own weakness. The next one is Kizaru versus Supernova. The first time seeing Marine Admiral Kizaru in action showcased just how potent his light fruit really is. Though calling this a fight is generous, as not one single member of the Supernovas was capable of even scratching Kizaru, due to his invulnerability to all forms of physical damage. The sheer strength and speed of Kizaru's attacks were so far ahead of the Supernova crew's own that they weren't even capable of comprehending them. The wrath of the Marine Admiral proved far too much for the Supernovas to handle. Next up, at number 6, Straw Hats versus Aokiji. When the Straw Hat Pirates went head-to-head with Marine Admiral Kuzan, better known by his alias, Aokiji, it quickly became clear just how outmatched the group was. When faced with the wielder of the Ice Fruit, every hit that seemed to successfully land on Aokiji would backfire on his opponent, leaving them completely frozen. Even during his one-on-one fight with Luffy, Kuzan almost immediately overwhelmed the Straw Hat captain. This was a fight where the crew had no real chance of winning and were only spared by the mercy of their ice-cold adversary. In the 5th spot, Sir Crocodile versus Luffy. Crocodile was the first villain not only to defeat Luffy, but to do so decisively. He was virtually untouchable in the dunes of Alabasta and impaled the Straw Hat captain on his hook. If he hadn't been rescued, Luffy would have succumbed to poison and met a disgraceful death. Since Luffy was already bleeding from the battle, he managed to land a single successful punch against the warlord during this fight. He would use this knowledge to defeat him later in the crypts beneath the city. Next up, in the fourth position, Usopp versus Perona. Due to already being so negative towards himself, Usopp was rendered almost entirely immune to Perona's attacks. This moment of realization turned the tide in his favor when he was able to use his 10-ton hammer to defeat Perona. In the spot number 3, Magellan versus Luffy. When Magellan caught up with Luffy, the Straw Hat captain was predictably overconfident. He brazenly lunged at the warden without armament, hacking and quickly found himself engulfed in noxious venom. In addition to being imprisoned, his body was now afflicted with poison that would have killed him without Ivanov's aid. Even despite the miracle hormones coursing through his veins, Luffy would shave 10 years from his life for his recklessness. Although his second encounter against Magellan alongside Mr. 3 proved more successful, he was not able to bring the man down and eventually agreed to flee from him. In the spot number 2, Mihawk versus Zoro. During the events of the Baratie arc, Zoro had the misjudgment to identify and challenge Hawkeye, a man regarded to be the world's greatest swordsman at the time. He overcame Zoro using a tiny dagger, stabbing him through the chest and humiliating him in front of dozens of spectators. However, Hawkeye admitted that he fought admirably and would honor Zoro by delivering a slash across his chest with his main sword. In addition to severely injuring him, this would serve as a reminder to the hero that he should always focus on his training. That brings us to the top prize. We have Kid versus Shanks. When Shanks, one of the 4 Emperors of the Sea, was faced with an overly confident Captain Kidd, an incredibly brief battle ensued, which resulted in Shanks dominating victory. Through his unmatched use of Conqueror's Haki, the red-haired captain completely overwhelmed both Captain Kidd and his entire crew with one swift strike. This incredible feat showcased just how big the gap in power was between the two, and that even when using the extent of his Magnet Fruit's abilities, Captain Kidd was no near match for everyone's favorite one-armed rogue. And that's it for the top 10 most one-sided fights in One Piece.